Very good morning to you. This is Sandeep, and you are watching the Indian Weekender. Today is 3rd of September, and we are into the 17th day of the latest lockdown inflicted by the new Delta variant. And Auckland continues to remain in alert level 4 lockdown, and it is likely to be there for at least some more days or a few weeks. And the rest of New Zealand, as we all know, has moved to alert level 3. So we have already seen more than 700 cases of infection, and we don't know where we are in terms of how our businesses are doing, how small businesses are doing. So you would have seen that this time of lockdown, there is a lot more, or rather a lot less anxiety in terms of what we can expect from government and what businesses can expect. And but still, having said that, it doesn't mean that there is no less tensions within our small businesses, and which forms the backbone of this country's economy. So the major announcement from the government in terms of supporting small businesses remains exactly the same as was the case in March last year when the country went into the first lockdown. That has been the wage subsidy scheme and the resurgent support scheme. So both of the schemes are already activated. Businesses, they have already applied for the first round of wage subsidy scheme that ended yesterday, and that was for 2 weeks. And the resurgent support scheme is already in activation as well. Apart from that, we haven't yet heard anything major from the government in terms of supporting the small businesses. There has been good financial support for supporting the communities. Like as we know that there has been a $26 million support for our Pacific communities, around about $25 million support for Whanau Ora, for the Whanauan communities. But yes, not explicitly anything for small businesses, which are facing the brunt of this lockdown and zero commercial activities. So in against that backdrop, what we have heard is National Shadow Treasurer Andrew Bailey has come up with this a support policy, that a rent support policy to support those small businesses. So what we have thought to go to Andrew and speak to him and understand more about this policy. So joining us today at our virtual studio is Andrew Bailey, National Party's Shadow Treasurer. So welcome to our studio, Andrew. How are you today?
I'm very good and nice to talk to you again.
Right. So Andrew, what I will do is, can you tell us a little bit more about this policy that you have announced, the rent support policy?
Yeah, okay. Hey, very good. Thank you, Sandeep. Hey, just the reason why I've developed this business rental support policy, I think we just need to remind ourselves, as you said before, New Zealand businesses, small businesses are the backbone and the powerhouse of the economy, and it's absolutely vital that they're successful. And the biggest issue I've got, and I've owned a lot of businesses, is I know the importance of cash flow. Now, this is a third lockdown. A lot of businesses have squeaked through, largely in many cases with the support of their landlords and the support of the wage subsidy. But every time we have these lockdowns, it just burns cash. And the thing that I'm really worried about is with the new Delta variant, we could possibly have these more lockdowns more regularly. And I don't want to say it, and I don't want it to happen, but I think we've got to look at that prospect. So I think we need to be forward-looking about what it means for our small businesses in the economy, and also what that means in terms of our economic powerhouse. So what I've done with the business rental support scheme is that I think we should be supporting small businesses, and I've defined those as 19 or fewer employees. And I want to use the existing wage support scheme, so we're not trying to create a new scheme, which means if you've had a 40% reduction in your revenue, and by the way, that could quite easily still occur under level 3, if you meet that criteria for a wage support subsidy, I'm suggesting that we should be providing rental support to those same class of businesses. Now, the nature of that scheme is that I think that the government should write out a check for 50% of the rent for those businesses that are in that 40% drop in revenue. Right. And that should be on the proviso that the landlord also agrees to a 25% reduction in the rent. Now, so that means for the tenant, the owner of the business, They know they're going to get 50% from the government, and they're going to get 25% reduction from the landlord. And
Right.
vice versa
Okay.
from
So,
the
Andrew, you
landlord.
say that the Crown or the government should pick up the tab for
Yeah,
50%
yeah,
of rent for our small businesses. So,
yeah.
have you costed your policy? Do you have any idea what kind of numbers we are looking at for the government? And does the government have that kind of money available there?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a moment, Sanjeev. It's just important I finish off what I'm talking about in this policy. So from the landlord's perspective, it means that they know that they're going to get 75% because the tenant's still on hook for the 25% and the Crown's writing on the check. The one big difference we've got, and this is where I think the government has been totally wrong talking about mediation. What we need is a process for businesses to be able to get to a quick resolution with their landlords. So we're talking about supercharging the arbitration process, which means there's a binding resolution to the dispute. And I think we're not going to mandate that the landlord has to agree to a 25% reduction. That's the expectation, because in some cases, landlords have been very, very generous, and I want to acknowledge that. So if you've, for instance, if you've got a landlord who's given 100% deduction in the last 2 lockdowns, and then, hey, presto, this time round or the next time round, the tenant's saying, well, I want you to do more reduction, that might be actually unfair. But in many cases, if they went to arbitration and the tenant could take the landlord to the arbitration and the landlord's saying, I just don't want to agree to this proposal, I want you to pay 100%. An arbitrator will be able to say, well, you're wrong. I'm now saying that the agreement is that you will agree to the 25%. So it's a strong indication of where the liability lies. And that is the key part. The mediation is a waste of time. The government keeps talking about mediation. So coming back to your question, Sandeep, I worked through this, and interesting, it's the scale of companies already applied under the wage subsidy. This shows you how vulnerable our small businesses are. About 200,000 companies have already applied, representing about 780,000 employees.
Right.
My estimate is this would cost between about 150 and 200 million a week. Now, to put that in context, we are currently, this lockdown is currently costing about 1.6 billion a week through the wage subsidy and the resurgent fund.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, you could say, well, 200 million. Well, actually, in the scheme of things, it's actually quite a small amount. And I think it's something that's vitally important, because what I don't want to see going into 23 is a whole lot of companies that have failed, a whole lot of people have been made unemployed, and actually we end up paying for them anyway because they're on the unemployment benefit, which is under a different name, but effectively that's what the job seeker benefit is. And already, just to put in context, we lost 50,000 people from March last year, from the first lockdown, who are still on the job seeker benefit now, who are not yet back in work. And that is an appalling statistic.
But the government is coming up with the statistics that we are still in this this lockdown, unemployment rate was somewhere around 4%. So don't you think they're already counting that those people who have lost jobs in the last lockdown, they are already back into the workforce?
Hey, look, I have a number of portfolios, one of which is statistics. Mm-hmm. Look, I'll give you a couple of things. First thing, if you're employed for an hour, 1 hour a week, you're deemed to be employed.
Right.
Right. Okay. So we actually in New Zealand have an underemployment issue, which is we've got a lot of people who have too few hours or not consistent hours. So nice headline figure, and I'm not debating the headline figure. It's a great headline figure, but actually you need to get underneath the numbers and not just believe everything that's the headline figure.
Sure. No, I completely agree with that. And neither, this is the time actually to worry about those good headline figures. Actually, this is the time to act and to save lives, and also to save jobs and save businesses, because that is also very important. Now, coming back from what we were discussing, that you have roughly costed around 200 million, a rough estimate for this policy for a week. And if we are looking for maybe around 6 weeks to 8 weeks of time around alert level 4 and alert level 3 lockdown. So how much total figure we are looking at? Somewhere around 3 to 4 billion?
I think you just, if we take it back up a level, Grant Robertson had 12 billion initially for COVID. and then he set up a $50 billion COVID fund.
Yes.
So that's 62 billion that he set aside for COVID. Unfortunately, Grant has worked his way through that, and in that, there's 12 billion he's squandered on a whole lot of projects. They may be worthy, but they've got nothing to do with COVID. We have, if we'd actually kept the money, we would have enough. We've now got about 3 billion left in the COVID fund as a result of the last couple of weeks of lockdown. There is money there actually. And Sandeep, I'd say to you, if I'd been running the show, I would have made sure that I would have been putting money where it needed to go. And if we end up with a whole lot of businesses failing and a whole lot of people on the unemployment heap, that is a really bad outcome. And that's why I've come up with this proposal, to make sure we do not end up in that situation, because literally businesses will run out of cash. That's why we need to be much more strategic about where we give support. And what I'm so angry about is that Mr. Robertson is just rubbish. He spent all this money on a whole lot of stuff it didn't need to be doing. Spend money where it needs to be spent. Look after the people that need to be looked after. And this is the biggest issue. And I'll take it up another level, Sandeep. In the OECD list of countries, there's about 34 of them. New Zealand is rare in the sense that it does not have a rent support package.
Yes, I read that in your press release, and I was going to ask you that question. So you already...
70% of all OECD countries have a rental support package, because they know they've got to look after their small businesses. We unfortunately have a government who thinks that they can just get on and they'll survive. Well, actually, I think if we go into lockdowns 4, 5, and 6, which unfortunately may be a prospect with the Delta virus, actually we may end up with a lot fewer businesses, and that will be absolutely damaging because we haven't thought about it and acted quickly enough.
Fair enough. No, that's quite a valid point. And I was going to ask you specifically about the list of OECD countries, which you say in your press release. But I think you have reassessed and reconfirmed that probably New Zealand is one of the very few countries which is not in that list of OECD countries and supporting small businesses with the rental relief, right?
Yeah, certainly in the rental area.
Right. Okay. Now coming back to what is the response of our small businesses community, and what is the response of the industry? So have you gone out and spoken to those businesses, or those businesses have come to speak to you, and what are their thoughts about this proposed rent relief support scheme?
Yeah, a very good question, Sandeep. Yeah, but I spent a bit of time before I released this policy talking to a whole stack of people. So Business New Zealand and all the EMAs that are part of that network strongly support that, and Kirk Hope came up with a press release when I released it. Also, I've spoken to organisations like Retail New Zealand, Franchising New Zealand, Restaurant New Zealand, and there's a number of other sort of organisations. You'll be aware that Michael Barnett is also Auckland Chamber of Commerce. He's got a petition going. I spoke to him the other day. He said he's got over 40,000 people on that petition. Look, there is widespread support for this package, because if you own a business, and unfortunately most of our government ministers haven't, but if you own a business, you know how important cash is. And this is a way, most of the people know what's happening. And unfortunately, Mr. Robertson's response is saying, use the Resurgence Fund. Well, actually, as you know, Sandeep, it's a one-off payment. Sure. It's a one-off payment. And if you have 10 employees, you get 5,500. If you get 20, you have 9,500.
Fair enough.
That's just a one-off payment,
yes,
which would be lucky to pay for your rates and your insurance.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I was just trying to simplify for the benefit of our readers and viewers from Indian Weekender that this Resurgent Payment Plan gives you a one-off $1,500 plus $400 for each employee, full-time employee. And that's what Andrew is saying, that if we are looking at around 3 employees, then probably it is just around $2,700 a month. And that's a one-off, isn't it?
One-off, yeah.
Yes, one-off. Yeah. And small businesses, they have been crying that, what they are expected to do from that money. Probably that major part of that money has been going towards rent. And then again, it doesn't cover the entire rent. It doesn't cover all other remaining outgoings, the other costs that are required for business to be operational. Insurance, rates, power, utilities. And that is where probably Andrew's the proposal, the rent relief support scheme that you are coming up is aiming to help businesses. And okay, that definitely makes sense. So some sense, I would say, and I will leave it for others to argue on that. I want to ask you, Andrew, that have you written to Mr. Robertson and proposed and offered him to pick up this scheme?
Oh, he's well aware of it. He's been asked numerous times by the media.
All right. Okay.
I just hope for New Zealand businesses they don't keep talking about this mediation thing. I've been through mediation. They're very qualified judges that run it, but basically have no power to come to a binding decision. What we need is clarity for the landlord and the tenant, because we don't want people going on in situations of trying to resolve this 3 months after. We cannot afford to do that. We need binding decisions. If you cannot get to an agreement between a landlord and tenant, our scheme doesn't preclude that. In fact, we encourage people to come to it. But if you have to go to arbitration, get a binding decision, good, we'll supercharge it, we'll make it happen quickly.
Right, fair enough. And the whole idea is to create more certainty, because I think that is one of the most important thing that our small businesses they need. Like in the current uncertain times, as you have rightly said, that probably now New Zealanders should come out of I would say that utopian image that COVID was a one-off thing. I think we all kind of agree that we are going to live with this COVID and the lockdowns in near future as well. So probably we need to see more maturity coming in every aspect of governance, and we need to gear up and create more uncertainty for every, and small businesses, they are one of the most important component of New Zealand's economy. So on that note, Andrew, thank you very much for sharing the details of this policy. And I would certainly say that I won't give a straight away green tick. We will continue to debate on that. But I would say that it is one of the most sensible financial or economic policy that National has come up of lately. And full marks to you on that sense. But we still need to hear back what other experts are saying, what community is saying. So on that note, I will just ask you, do you have any final comment to make today before I let you go?
We should talk more, because during the last election, we announced a mental support package for small businesses, which we've reactivated. And the second element, my colleague, Todd McClay, has been pushing the issue around startup businesses. 35,000 startup businesses are not entitled to any compensation or assistance at the moment. We think both those issues need to be picked up. So it'd be quite good to come back and talk about those at some point.
Yeah, sure, definitely. And one more pending issue that's giving you a heads up, and probably I will go and speak to Grant Robertson as well about this, that when this resurgent plan was announced last year, I think March 2020, what we have seen is that we haven't seen any innovation in that resurgent plan or wage subsidy. Like we are 18 months away from that time. Well, at that time, COVID was a shock. It was a sudden shock. So we do understand that the policies were developed on the hoof, and which has largely served New Zealanders quite well. But the thing is that we as Indian Weekender, we have been talking to a lot of small businesses actually who have jumped into business ownership in last, say, 18 months of this hiatus between last lockdown and now. And what they're finding is that suppose somebody who has started his business probably 3 months ago, and the current resurgent plan is not in a situation to help them. So
yeah, no, that's the point, Sandeep. That's why there's 35,000 of those businesses, and that in many cases they'll be quite viable, but they simply, because they're younger than 6 months old, they don't get any support at all. We just think it's wrong.
So I think in that space, I think, well, government is doing well in managing COVID and the infection, but I think they need more. They need to do more in terms of innovating on those policy. And I think, yeah, you bring a good policy. I encourage you to write to Robertson as well, although he would be aware, but yeah, do your part and let's see where we land. So thanks for your time today, Andrew. And as you say that we will come back and discuss more often in near future. Thank you very much.